Welcome to the Fueling Fire podcast, the first and best nutrition podcast for first responders. We bring in the wellness experts who know the fire service, but can break down the science so that you don't have to. This podcast will help you eat better when you don't have time, money, or energy. I'm Megan Lautz, a civilian dietitian obsessed with helping firefighters boost energy and lose body fat while on shift work without the stress. Let's get into the podcast. All right, welcome back to the Fueling Fire podcast, where we talk about first responder nutrition. Today we have Mike Connor from Frontline Mobile Health, and I'm super excited to have him because we are talking about testosterone. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.
I'm so excited because I feel like this is a hot topic that just doesn't come well from the vegetable lady. So I think you've got the experience, and I would love to hear or have the audience know, what's your background? Can you give us a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. So I am a retired Army PA, and I went into business with a buddy of mine, and we focus on first responder health and wellness. Mm-hmm. We take care of fire departments and law enforcement departments. And what we do is we do their annual health and wellness screening. That follows cardiovascular screening, cancer screening, behavioral health screening. And in the past, probably 3 years, we started adding testosterone on because you listen to your customers and they say, hey, what was my testosterone this year? And so that's kind of where we got that going. And so we started this company. We operate in about 8 states now. I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm an avid workout enthusiast and a health enthusiast. So that's who I am, and that's what we do.
Awesome. Well, and so when you do testosterone testing, I'm just curious, do you do that even if it's a younger first responder, or is it a certain age range? Okay, so you just test it regardless.
Yeah, depending on the level of service, we'll test it, period, right? And which is interesting because you will see some, borderline low testosterone levels in some of the younger population, but we can get into how that probably happens and some of the contributing factors to that as we talk a little bit more.
Excellent. Well, so I guess kind of kicking off then, so what is the incidence of low testosterone in the fire and police population?
So we have a lot more information on fire. So a lot of this stuff is going to be focused on fire.
That's fair.
The nice thing is that fire has a requirement in most states to have a physical every year. So we collect a lot of information. It's not the same way with police, unfortunately. That's a topic for probably another podcast. Mm-hmm. We know in the general population, though, that as you age, your testosterone declines. Usually about after the age of 30, your testosterone will start to drop 1% to 2% annually. And then you start to get this precipitous decline after you turn 60. A previous study, I can't pronounce the last name, it's Ranadiv et al., looked at 301 male firefighters, found that, about 81% of them were overweight and obese, and that plays a part in that. About 40% had fatty liver disease. In the low testosterone group, only about 3.1% had a normal body mass index, right? And so that's going to come back to where I talk about the testosterone optimization still here in a little bit. And so that was kind of their findings. Recently, I pulled some data that, we do about 12,000, 13,000 physicals annually. And we also collect testosterone. So we did a cohort of findings, 1,151 firefighters. Average age was about 39 plus or minus 9 years. And we looked at the incidence of low testosterone. So in the low testosterone range, we found about 9.2% of those firefighters were in that low testosterone range. So that's somewhere around 140 to 150 of that 1,150, right? Or 1,100.
That's not as high as I would have thought it would have been.
No. Yeah, that isn't. And then, we're also looking at, an age group that's 39 or 30 to 48 essentially is what we're looking at. So we compared the effect of testosterone on aerobic capacity, and people and this is where the practicality of hey, why should I supplement with testosterone, or why should I optimize my testosterone kind of comes in. If you had a low testosterone, comparatively, your aerobic capacity or your ability to use oxygen for energy and muscle movement and all that other stuff was significantly lower in the, like, even the borderline low category, right? So the people that were somewhere between, 270 to like 350 testosterone, 300 is kind of the magic number where some of these clinics and the American Urological Association starts to begin to treat low testosterone. But just that first bump up had a pretty significant jump in VO2, about, I think it's 1.5 or 1.6 mils per kg per minute, which is about a quarter of a met. And then when you go up to the people that were in the reference range, they were actually at a solid met, right? So 4.23 mils per kg per minute, which is a big thing in the exercise physiology world. And then in the people that were in the high normal range, right? So the people that were, somewhere around, 940 or greater, which we can make assumptions on what's going on there. They're either really young, or they're genetically just, testosterone producers, or they're possibly supplementing. We didn't remove people that were supplementing with testosterone from the study either. So,
gotcha.
So there is an impact of testosterone on health. We do see about just on this cohort, there was about 9 to 10% of the individuals in that study did have low testosterone, and it matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it matters for fitness. What else would testosterone, like having your testosterone within a normal range, like why would that be important for?
Oh, sure. Like, everybody knows the classic symptoms, right? Reduced sex drive, mental fog, erectile dysfunction. The more practical application as a tactical athlete is muscle protein synthesis. It's important for building muscle and maintaining muscle. As we age, we want to maintain as much muscle as we can to kind of help our longevity out. And for firefighters, that, when you're on the job for 20, 30 years, you do want to optimize your testosterone in a healthy way is what I would say. Right.
And that's something that can be done through lifestyle, of course, but, we're also seeing all these different testosterone clinics pop up, those kinds of things. So like with that, you kind of mentioned some of the symptoms. What does a firefighter or first responder do if they're like, that checked a lot of boxes for me? What do I do now?
So the first thing I want to bring up is that there's really only one clinical questionnaire. It's called the ADAM questionnaire, that addresses the symptoms of low testosterone and it's been validated, right? It's been validated. So it shows that hey, yeah, if you hit these boxes, that's kind of where you're at. I'll include that in the show notes that I told you I'd offer to you. Sure. So we'll just kind of briefly cover symptoms of low testosterone, right? So reduced sex drive, erectile dysfunction, decreased energy and fatigue, loss of muscle mass and strength, increased body fat, depressed mood or irritability, difficulty concentrating, loss of body hair. Now, the thing that's important to distinguish, and I think that is kind of important for us to mention, is that some of these symptoms, the loss of body hair, probably not so much, but some of these other symptoms can be behavioral health symptoms, right? Yep. Depression, post-traumatic stress. And that's one of those things where, if you get your blood checked and it's normal, you probably need to do a self analysis or a self check and just make sure that you're not having this other thing, right? And don't get walked into that thing of what I like to call the optimization hole, right? Like the testosterone optimization hole. It's you're a little low. We could optimize you. Is it the alcohol? Is it the poor sleep? Is it the depression that you're not addressing? Is it the anxiety you're not addressing? Is it the post-traumatic stress you're not addressing? So it plays an important factor. And we do need to distinguish that some of these symptoms can be behavioral health symptoms. Right. So take care of yourself first.
Right. Or, maybe that comes in addition to, maybe we do consider getting some TRT or something like that. You are getting it addressed. But the other side of the coin is if you're having a lot of those symptoms and they're not getting fixed with the TRT, then it's kind of
Yeah, it's that whole physical health, mental health, spiritual health, right? We have to make sure that we're managing all of those buckets adequately. Right. And if you're not, then it's, each of those things are going to eventually dip into another pillar and affect something else or some other aspect of your life.
Absolutely. So, and then mental health, that would just primarily potentially therapy or sometimes medication. It may be
sometimes medication. I do want to point out though that medication is rarely ever effective without the added benefit of therapy, and that like if you're just going to take a pill every day, you're really probably not addressing the root issue of the problem.
Sure, absolutely. And so do you have any therapists like that you guys tend to refer out to, or is it kind of just, it depends on the department and where people are at?
Yeah, there's like a geographic spread. We do a lot of work with the readiness group in the DFW area. But we have our own psychologists, but we don't really work in the treatment arm yet. But it depends on the geographic area and where you're addressing that stuff. And whenever we do business in those areas, we try to make connections with people.
You find the right clinicians. Okay, awesome. So if it's not behavioral health,
sure,
or maybe it is a little behavioral health, but I'm still kind of latched onto this. What do I do if I feel like it's low? So I go to the my primary care physician. Do I ask Doc Health? Like, who do I go to?
So, number one, you should always go to your primary care physician. And to the firefighters out there that don't have a primary care physician, it's time to get one, right? Like you have insurance, you pay for insurance, might as well get one. Doesn't hurt. It's always good to have contact there. So you can go to your primary care physician and just be upfront, right? Like advocate for yourself. Hey, like I've been experiencing these symptoms, right? Like, I don't think it's this. I think it may be this. Could you test me for my testosterone? Right. And that's usually the first step. And most primary care physicians or PAs or NPs, they won't balk at that, right? They'll, oh yeah, sure. Like absolutely. We'll test it. There are rules to getting tested though, right? Like you want to don't test yourself. I would recommend that you not test yourself whenever you're coming off shift and you had 3 overnight calls. Right. And you're an absolute wreck because, sleep plays a big part in testosterone production. And then, don't get tested after 10 a.m., right? You should be getting tested long before 10 a.m. So, try to get tested whenever you've been off shift for at least 24 hours and that you've had a relatively good night of sleep and that you have you're getting it done first thing in the morning because your testosterone levels naturally peak in the morning, not in the afternoon. So if you're getting your testosterone tested in the afternoon, you're going to be artificially low.
Gotcha. And so is it just testosterone that they're looking to get tested? Or are there other things in their blood work that we're looking at as well?
No, they'll look at other stuff. I mean, a good clinician is going to do a number of things, right? They might do a thyroid panel to make sure that it's not coming up from a thyroid issue. They'll probably order a luteinizing hormone, a follicle stimulating hormone, just to make sure that it's not somewhere in the upward chain of the hypothalamus pituitary axis somewhere. And then they'll probably, want to pull your fasting blood sugar and your A1. I mean, you'll get a whole host of labs, right? Your hemoglobin A1C, your lipid profile, because they're going to want to understand risk. They'll definitely pull a CBC because they want to know what your hemoglobin and hematocrit looks like before they put you on testosterone. So they're going to get a bunch of labs on you, but they're not just going to pull testosterone. They'll probably pull testosterone. They'll probably pull a free or bioavailable testosterone, and then they'll probably pull a sex hormone binding globulin as well.
Gotcha. So you're not necessarily going to a specialist first. So do they typically refer out to a specialist, or does the PCP usually take care of all of this? Some
PCPs are happy to do it. And some PCPs are like, you know what, I'm going to send you to a urologist because that's probably the safest thing for us to do. And urologists, they not only go to medical school, but they go through an additional 4 years of like a surgical residency, and they're intimately familiar with that portion of the body.
Right.
So they understand hormone health and all the upstream stuff and the downstream stuff that's associated with it. And if I were going to get treated, I would be treated by a urologist. I would not go to some other location. That's kind of where I would prefer to go. But, it also depends, right? Like if you're on the middle of frickin' BFE, and your urology clinic is like 3 hours away, your PCP may be totally fine like handling that stuff, and you probably are totally fine handling that stuff at that location. So it's kind of location dependent, right? In a large metropolitan area, probably go see a urologist or somebody who can handle it like that. And, some place where you're out in rural Ohio or rural Michigan, then maybe you go see your PCP and they manage that stuff for you.
Gotcha. And if the PCP is like, not too comfortable with this, or like, I'm not testing it for whatever reason, like, would that be, maybe try a different PCP, maybe try to reach out to a urologist?
Yeah. There are some primary cares who, are not willing to have this discussion, and it's kind of, it's too bad, right? Because if someone's concerned about their health and their hormone health, like, they should be able to go to their primary care. Some people are just too uncomfortable with it. Some of it stems from, frank abuse, right? Like, we see frank abuse of testosterone everywhere.
Right.
And it is a $1 billion industry. Like, let's not forget about that, right? Like, testosterone medication prescriptions, have like tripled and quadrupled since like the early 2000s. And, we have all these clinics up here. And some people just may, some physicians just may be their line in the sand. I have seen lower testosterone, like hypogonadism in younger firefighters, but, we as a practice, we try to coach them. We don't do treatment, but we try to coach them, to like, chop wood and carry water, right? Like you have to take care of yourself first if you want to optimize this stuff.
Right.
And there's a way about going and doing that.
Sure. And so what that tends to lead to, or at least I've seen a lot of, is going to these, TRT clinics. So like,
sure. Yeah, we see it too.
Yeah. Like, my PCP's not touching it. My OC health isn't touching it. I'm super frustrated. I feel like this is the problem. Yeah. And then, they go get some blood work from, I don't know, like, I think Prime Body's one, like,
sure.
What are the concerns?
Centers of America, Men's Health. There's a whole bunch of names out there. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, what are the concerns with the testosterone clinics, and what's a big red flag to look out for?
Yeah. So, for me, the big concern, and not that there's anything, wrong with business, because that's what I do, right? Is like, it's a cash business, right? So you're incentivized to prescribe medications, right? You're not incentivized to coach, teach, and mentor a patient to, adopt some lifestyle changes to improve themselves first, reevaluate. And if they've, chopped wood and carried water and they've done all those things, then consider the supplementation, then consider, the issue. And then some of these clinics will, like they like to say, optimize testosterone, meaning that they'll get you to the upper limit of normal. And it's personal choice. I think you're masking a bigger problem potentially. And if you're still and then a lot of the times what comes with that is poor management, right? You're paying for a service. You'll occasionally get labs drawn, and labs, need to be drawn at least every 6 months, right? You need to be looking at your cardiac risk factor profile. You need to be looking at, your hemoglobin and hematocrit. I can't tell you how many times we have patients that will come in and like they're beet red from the shoulders up. And so that's like the first sign that, you're running a little high in the tank, right? Like you got a little polycythemia going on. And that presents a problem, especially in an occupation that depends heavily on your cardiorespiratory health and your heart. If you're running thick on the blood, then that means that your heart's pumping a lot harder than it needs to be. You're probably slowly adding some ventricular wall thickness to the heart. You're probably which turns into, ventricular arrhythmias, which can turn into, ventricular enlargement. And there's just a bunch of downstream effects. So that type of stuff needs to be managed really well. And, and we will see patients from time to time that are just not being managed very well. And, it's for the wrong, it's with the right intent of like wanting to feel better and feel good and perform well, but it's just going about it the wrong way and not being managed in a safe manner sometimes.
Absolutely. Like, because it seems like, and I've seen this through family or friends where they try these clinics and it's like you go to try to look at the clinic, you can't find the physician who's in charge, you can't find the nurse who's in charge, you can't look in to see their background. And it's just oh, well, they did the blood work and we talked on the phone. But I think there's a little bit more than just doing the blood work and talking on the phone because.
Yeah. And some of these large, like nationwide places, they're like private equity and VC funded. Right. So they are very invested in selling you a product and making you happy and, not necessarily living to the like, hey, let's be safe with our prescribing practices and making sure we're getting frequent touch points with our patients.
Chiefs and wellness pros, are your first responders struggling with nutrition because they just can't figure out how to apply it on shift work? Are they showing up to shift underhydrated and over-caffeinated? Do they struggle with body composition, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, high blood glucose, but don't know how to make the changes on shift that will actually move the needle? Then the Fueling Fire workshop is for you. These 4 to 6 hour workshops are designed for peer fitness trainers, company officers, academy instructors, or just general first responders who are looking to learn more about nutrition that they can apply immediately that day at the workshop. The Fueling Fire workshop provides practical strategies for packing a go bag, hydrating on the fire ground, preventing nutrition-related injuries in recruits, aka making sure they eat enough so that they don't pass out during PT. The Fueling Fire workshop is instructed by yours truly, Megan Lautz, a dietitian that has a proven 3-step framework to overhaul the basics, aka Nutrition 101, but in a way that you've never seen it done before for the fire service. The second part of the framework is igniting optimal performance. How do I hydrate? How do I pack a go bag? How do I optimize my energy levels on the fire ground realistically? The third step in the framework is igniting lifestyle changes. How do I eat healthier with fast food? What can I make for dinner? How do I change the environment at the station? Practical strategies that can help your first responders eat better themselves and promote long-term changes in your overall department. Plus, if you book by February 28th, you get the Quick Bites videos for free. This is a $1,300 value that extends or prolongs the life of the Fueling Fire workshop. These are 12 10-minute videos that you can add into your learning management software, aka Target Solutions, with quick tips on how first responders can eat healthier on shift that day. Go to rescuerd.com to book a discovery call today. Sure. So then the downsides of these things, I guess let's talk about the upsides or the standards. Yeah. So sure. Like I've noticed too, people get on the testosterone, maybe they're in their early 30s, their 40s, their doc said no, they felt a little weird. So they rely on these clinics. What is the typical feeling of getting on TRT? Like what would that look like for a lot of people?
I couldn't tell you. I've never been on it. But what I've heard, right? Like what I've heard is that like their recovery rate is better, right? Like, you can match your training volume if you're training for something or let's say you're a firefighter and you need to be physical all the time, right? With your muscle mass typically increases whenever you increase your serum testosterone. And then, what we saw in our paper, obviously, is like an increased VO2, right? And the direct correlation of increased VO2 is you're not a bottle hog, right? Like you're not sucking the bottle down all the way. We actually saw that in a previous study that we did with Pflugerville, Chief Perkins's crew about, we looked at consumption testing and VO2, and VO2 is absolutely important for consumption testing, right? I mean, it makes sense. It's just how effective you are at draining the bottle. So, there are practical applications and things that you'll feel better, you'll recover faster. Some people report I've heard from patients like, oh yeah, I'm sleeping way better than I was before, which is kind of weird because there's this big, it's like a circle, right? Like if you look at the way testosterone is produced in the human body, testosterone, when you go to sleep, you have these cycles of sleep. When you hit REM sleep is when GnRH is kicked out, right? GnRH gets kicked out to the bloodstream, and then luteinizing hormone gets kicked out. And then luteinizing hormone travels down to the testes, affects the Leydig cells, and the Leydig cells stimulate testosterone production. So, but conversely, sometimes people with low testosterone say that they're getting horrible sleep. So it's like this vicious cycle, right? Like you have to figure out where it is. But I think a lot of it also has to do with like some of those other factors that are associated with, just having, that I think I talked to you about it just before we started, but like that testosterone optimization stool, you have to, excuse me, there's like 3 legs on the stool. If you chop one out, you're kind of wobbly and all over the place, if you can think about things that way. And really it's, nutrition, right? Like I just tell our patients like, hey, don't eat like a jerk, right? Mm-hmm. It should not be in a wrapper all the time, right? Like it should not come in a can all the time. You should be relatively consistent, right? So make sure that nutrition's on point. Sleep is an important factor. We just talked about why sleep is so important, right? Like, getting somewhere in the area of 7 to 9 hours of sleep, so you can get like multiple cycles of REM. That way you're good. And then just kind of understanding that, alcohol has like a really bad impact on your sleep structure, right? So like if you're throwing down and you're hammering beer and like you're going to sleep and you're like, well, I got good sleep, but I don't know why my testosterone's low. It's like, well, like when you drink alcohol, not only do you have to wake up in the middle of the night and pee, but you've also got the problem of not hitting these sleep cycles appropriately because of the effect of alcohol. So try to cut out alcohol at least 2 or 3 hours before bedtime. Try not to drink more than 2 drinks at a time. So there's nutrition, there's sleep, right? And then there's exercise. There was there's research that shows that like any type of exercise is good for improving testosterone, even the aerobic stuff, right? But lifting heavy with big muscle groups has a much larger effect on testosterone production than, let's say, go running a 5K, right? So, and you can introduce those things. So it's those 3 legs of the stool. If you really want to be honest with yourself, and let's say you get your labs drawn, and they're like, yeah, you're kind of borderline low. We're not going to look at treatment yet. Well, then be honest with yourself, right? Like hammer down on sleep, hammer down on nutrition, and hammer down on exercise. Reevaluate 3 to 4 months later. And then if it had a great effect, perfect. And you know what you got to do, right? If it didn't really have an effect and you're somebody who's like my age, who's like a year away from 50, then, possibly it could be time to like get on testosterone, right? Like you could be looking to trend that way, especially if you're having those symptoms. So, I want to be clear that I don't think there's anything wrong with testosterone.
Right. If it's a need.
Therapy, it just needs to be done right. And you need to have all your other ducks in a row. It's a lot like using supplements, right? Like if you're going to use supplements, then if you're using them as a substitute for food, it's probably not a good idea. I get that out of necessity, especially when you're on shift. If you're a firefighter, you're like, yeah, I need some protein. I'm going to smash this Quest bar. I need some protein. I'm going to smash this freaking whey protein shake.
Yep.
Right. But if you can help it, like try to get your meals in per day, hit your calorie goals. And then, if you need a little extra protein after a workout, sure, like go smash a whey protein shake or take some creatine or something. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and those are going to be your big ones for sure. And like with that, like from what I've heard is like, oh my gosh, I feel so much better once they take, the testosterone replacement therapy. They're like feeling amazing. And then it starts to wane. Mm-hmm. And then they feel like they need more. And it just becomes this cycle. And like what my other concern is what are there long-term repercussions? Like once you're on TV, like, are you on it for forever?
You're shutting down the access, right? Like I think I heard somewhere that like after 2 years, you're basically dependent on it, right? Like there's a weaning process involved. You have to get other hormone supplements involved in order to come off it. You should never, like if you've been on it for at least like 6 months, you should never just like cut yourself off. because some of the effects associated with that, because like what you're doing is you're taking your only form of testosterone now that your testes have essentially said, okay, I'm going to go take a long-term nap, right? Like, you've turned off your only form of testosterone production, and then your testes are like, well, it's going to take us a while to get things going again, guys. So, right. So you should never just stop abruptly after using it for a while. And then, I think I've heard, like, if I recall correctly, like somewhere around 2 years, like there's a involved process, and then there's fertility concerns too. Right. So you just have to be careful about like how long you're doing it. If you're, I firmly believe that, firefighters are probably at a disproportionate disadvantage, right? We like, especially depending on your shift schedule, the busyness of the station, right? Like, if we're talking about like a sleepy place that's got like, less than 1,000 calls a year, and you have like, I don't know, like half of a call average per night, you're probably better off just chopping wood and carrying water, right? But if you're like in a large metropolitan department that's like on a, there's some crazy schedules out there where you're like 24 on, 24 off for like 7 shifts, and you're off for 2 weeks. Like, you really got to capitalize on that 2 weeks. Oh, that reminds me. So what you do off shift matters, right? If you're picking up other shifts at another department, right, which we see a lot of in our practice, or, you're hustling and you're like, you've got a fencing company or a construction company or a lawn care maintenance company, like most firefighters do. Excuse me. You have to be really good about protecting your sleep whenever you're off shift. And if you're not protecting your sleep whenever you're off shift, then the trade-off is like, okay, do I pay money for this supplementation because my testosterone is low, or do I get my act together and like improve my sleep, potentially save some money by not eating out all the time and having home cooked meals, and, listening to your podcast and your advice, of course, right?
Well, and I was going to say, like, testosterone replacement therapy, especially if you go to these clinics, is not covered by insurance typically.
Not
like
at all. Yeah. No, insurance will laugh at you. Yeah. If you are 20 years old or 30 years old, if you have a testosterone that is like 301, like, insurance is going to laugh in your face and tell you, no, we're not covering that.
Nope.
Right.
Yeah.
It'll be really hard to get covered. So that's kind of a struggle. Yeah.
And $150 to $250 a month, like, I would look at that and be like, okay, well, we can get your meals prepped for almost all your shifts that month.
I have heard of some of these companies where like $150 to $250 a month is just the treatment, but like the labs are like $700.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So like every 6 months you're dropping $700, right? And then, you're paying $150 to $250 a month on top of that. So, you're spending a good chunk of change that could be a nice family vacation, or
sure,
or a gym membership, even to a nice gym.
Yeah, personal training, a strength coach who writes your program. Like, there are things that you could use this money for otherwise, but I think people just kind of tend to latch onto, that one guy, my buddy at the station, he started taking it, he lost the weight, he feels amazing. Yeah. So, but my PCP is not prescribing it because I'm at 301, Yeah. So it's not that I'm trying to be negative. It's just, I want people to really kind of consider, like, there are a lot of downsides to this potentially. There's long-term consequences, there's cardiac consequences. Yeah. You mentioned fertility. What's the potential impact on fertility?
Well, I mean, if you're constantly feeding testosterone in your body and your testes shut down, you have these other cells that are adjacent to Leydig cells called Sertoli cells that are responsible for reproductive health. They start to get sleep too, like, it's just like, hey, we're getting all this stuff from the environment. Like, I think we're going to be fine. So they just take a little nap.
Yeah.
And then restarting that whole process, takes some time, and which is why, like, you should always go to a urologist, right? Like, I don't treat testosterone. I don't, it's not in my wheelhouse. Most of the stuff I'm spitting out now is like things that I recall from like going through school and just talking through, with firefighters and looking things up from time to time because I get asked these questions. But yeah, like there's a risk, like there's always a risk. And then, the thing I think that's probably the most important thing for firefighters to remember when it comes to management of testosterone is if you're not being managed well, there is an inherent risk. Like you don't have an easy job, right? Like if you have, polycythemia, right, and you don't so elevated hemoglobin hematocrit above normal reference ranges, if that just means that your blood's thicker, right? So what does that mean? That means that you're more prone to dehydration, right? And what do you do when you go fight a structure fire, right? Like you put on 75 pounds worth of extra crap, right? You carry crap all around, you're managing a hose, you're exposed to intense heat at times, and your blood's getting thicker and thicker and more viscous and more viscous. And so that can cause cardiac complications, right? And, there's a reason we have rehab programs in place whenever you're on scene, but, it's just one of those things that are a contributor to risk, right? And everything in the fire service that I have learned is it's always about risk management, right? Like, what are you willing to risk? So the question you need to ask yourself is that, like, if you're going to go to these clinics, like, what are you willing to risk, right? Like, there's financial risk, there's personal health risk, there's operational risk, right? Mm-hmm. Like if your hemoglobin hematocrit's too high, there's a very specific chapter in NFPA 1582 that discusses that, like, hey, you can't be considered, suitable for operations if your H&H is too high, and you have to show us that you can go back, like you can normalize that level by just donating blood typically. Mm-hmm. That way you can be cleared for operations. So there are impacts, occupationally, not just health wise, to the firefighter.
Absolutely. Okay. So now kind of shifting, so we talked about fitness. So fitness, it seems to be as long as you are getting some sort of workout in, that's mm-hmm. the big focus. Yeah. Sleep, you said 7 to 9 hours. I know that doesn't always seem super realistic. Do you feel like that, trying to get that 5 to 6 hour absolute minimum when possible? Is that?
Yeah, sure. Right. Like, a REM cycle occurs about every 90 minutes. Right. Mm-hmm. So, the low end of the optimization is somewhere like 4 REM cycles, and 4 REM cycles is about 6 hours. Okay. So if you can get that much, now I do want to be realistic and pragmatic with, some of the people that we're talking with. Right. If you've got toddlers at home, hey man, you're just going to go through a rough patch. Okay. Like I've got a 3 and a 2-year-old at home. And, our 2-year-old's going through some sleep regression right now. So I'm sure I'm tanked right now, and I feel it at times. Right. Mm-hmm. But that's just a phase of life. That's not a reason to kind of get on it right now. So it's just one of those things where you have to be realistic and have some, kind of expectation. And I certainly don't want to, tell a firefighter like, hey, yeah, you must get 7 to 9 hours of sleep without fail. Right. Like if you're doing it 80% of the time, you're probably winning, right? 70, 80% of the time, you're probably winning. The tough part is where do you balance the shift schedule, right? And I have a lot of ideas and a lot of, opinions about shift schedules. Like, why are we doing shift change at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m.? Like, why aren't we doing it at in the evening, mm-hmm. right? Like in the evening, it makes more sense because you come to work, right? You've had a day with the family, eat dinner with the kids, go to work, you do your overnight shift, right? You get some sleep or you don't get any sleep, come back, and then you work through the day and then you come off and then you go through a normal sleep cycle, right? So You're not doing this weird switching, right? Where it's like, oh, I've got to, I had 3 calls last night. I've got to, get some rest in the morning. So. Right. Where you can't be with your kids or you can't go to the side gig. You can't go to the academy and adjunct for a couple hours, or, you just do it anyway and survive off of energy drinks and energy drinks, super bad too, right? Big impact on sleep. Like caffeine has a half-life. I'm preaching to the choir, right? Like caffeine has a half-life of like 8 to 12 hours, depending on how fast you metabolize it. Mm-hmm. So that afternoon bump of freaking Monster that's got 200 milligrams at 2 p.m. Well, at 2 a.m., you've got 100 milligrams of still hanging out. It's still hanging out, just kind of like making you think, it's that little meme where like the brain's just like, hey, are you awake? Yeah, I'm awake. Yeah, caffeine, absolutely. And then like some of the supplemental stuff, and I know this is maybe not your wheelhouse, maybe we'll just have a conversation back and forth. But, some people, again, it's like, all right, well, I feel just frustrated with the fitness and the sleep and the nutrition. So like, let's see if we can just figure this out with supplements. And two of the popular ones are, and I can't pronounce it, Yeah,
Right,
Tone got, yeah. So yeah, you emailed me before this, right? So full disclosure, she emailed
full
me.
disclosure, I asked the internet.
Yeah, so Tongat and Fedosia agressus, Tongat Ali and Fedosia agressus. So
Yes.
so I'm not a big herbal supplements guy, right? Like I've never been a big fan of that sort of stuff because it's just not very well regulated.
Yeah.
You don't know if someone's like mixing that stuff in their mom's basement. You don't know if it's, I mean, nowadays it's better because there's like third-party verification labs that are listed on the back. So you need to be looking for that sign, number one.
Mm-hmm.
And just because like some dude with a PhD puts his name after it, like he's getting paid to do that. Okay. Like he's totally getting
You
paid.
want to talk about big pharma, like the supplement industry.
Yeah, exactly. Supplement companies are just as bad.
They're
right?
they're always worse actually, but you know.
So like you want to make sure it's got that like third party verification at least.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so what I could find, Tongat actually had a lot. Fedosia had like a one on PubMed. But the one that like stuck out to me on the Tongat Ali was that they did a meta-analysis, but like by the time all the studies made it through all their exclusion criteria, they only had 5 RCTs that they could look at. So
right.
Meaning that it was like very applicable and pragmatic for use and discussion. And they evaluated and it showed promise is what they said in increasing testosterone in healthy and hypogonadal men. So, right. So if you're a regular dude walking around with like 600 to 900 range, you'll
mm-hmm.
probably bump up taking that stuff. And then if you're a person who's actually got low T, you could benefit from taking it. Don't know the dosing regimen. Don't know. Like,
I can interject with that. So the dosing regimen is 200 to 400 milligrams.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest concern is heavy metal toxicities.
Working in someone's basement, right? Like, where is it coming from? Where is it getting cultivated from, right? Is it getting cultivated in a place that doesn't have good industrial hygiene practices?
Yep.
Or good farming practices? Because some of this stuff comes from like third world countries where that are like next to mines, right? Like, so you have to be careful on where you're sourcing some of these things from.
Yep. And the other side of this too is the interactions. So one of the big things that this interacts with, Tongat Ali, is high blood pressure medications.
That's not good.
No good. Not good.
No, that's not good.
And another one that I wanted to mention, I'm not sure if you have anything, but at least to tie it in, is ashwagandha. Have you seen an increased usage of ashwagandha as well?
No, a lot of our guys, I've been removed from actual direct patient care. I'll occasionally go every once in a while, but like I've not had people say like, oh yeah, I'm using ashwagandha. Is ashwagandha Fedosia? Is that what it is? Yeah,
I popped this one up as a surprise. No, it's not. Okay. It's a different herbal. And the reason I wanted to mention it is it's another one that is popular for increasing testosterone, but also improving mental health conditions, which all 3 of these are the ones. So it's a popular one for a lot of first responders because of those 2 reasons. The typical dose range is about 600 milligrams per day of, I think it's KSM 66 extract. Is that the type, I think? Anyway, but the big concern with ashwagandha is, again, the interactions. It interacts with high blood pressure medications, blood glucose medications, mental health medications.
Yeah, that's not good. And, the thing is it like a CYP inhibitor or something, or
I believe so. I think is that the one with grapefruit? I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah. That it basically, if grapefruit interacts with your medication, ashwagandha interacts with your medication. So as soon as someone says, "Hey, I'm on X medication for high blood pressure, for cholesterol, for diabetes, for mental health," a lot of these herbals get knocked out immediately because they will either increase the effectiveness or increase some. Effectiveness, I don't know. It'll increase the medication or decrease the effectiveness of a medication as well.
Yeah, it just increases. It probably increases the metabolism, so it makes it less bioavailable in order to make your medication useful. I actually just went through this with my mom while she was in the hospital, unfortunately. There was a medication interaction, and they had like a treatment goal of getting her out. But it turns out that one medication was counteracting the other medication that was part of her treatment goal for lab values. And I was just like, that's not right. But No, yeah. So let's talk about that real quick, right? Like if you're talking about interacting with blood pressure medication, if you're on a blood pressure medication, it's because we don't want you to pop in the middle of a scene. And then, behavioral health stuff, if you're on behavioral health medications, it's for a reason and you don't want to decrease their efficacy. The other thing that I would be concerned about too is like most of those behavioral health medications are serotonin medications. So like there's a potential for, and I don't know if this is right because I'm not familiar with the interaction with ashwagandha, but the big concern on, these SSRIs and these SNRIs are serotonin syndrome, which can be deadly. So
or at the very least, it can increase drowsiness. So when you're taking a these two medications,
you're an engineer or an apparatus specialist, right? And
you're driving the wee-wee wagon, it's not going to be good. So again, like not trying to be a negative Nancy, I just feel like when you go on the internet, when you talk to your buddies, they are going to they're only going to talk about the good stuff and not really talk about all the bad stuff. When the reality is,
and if sorry to cut you off, but
no, you're fine. Yeah.
And to be honest, like there's also some Dunning-Kruger, right? Yep. Like you read, a paragraph of something and it's like, oh, well, this clearly states that this is, awesome. And then you've got, someone like you in your shoes or someone like me who's been on the treatment side as well. And it's like, no, that's not what that means. That's like you got to look at the study. You have to like validate it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is like a lot of this stuff could be improved or you could save money by doing coaching or like working one-on-one with a strength coach or a dietitian or like for me, and I listen, I know I'm not related to testosterone. I'm a lady. So that doesn't, yes, I know that it has some impact, but like a lot of my issues lately have been related to anxiety and it's like stomach issues, headaches, trouble sleeping. And I'm like, oh, it's just like, I've got an ulcer or something. And then I go to the doctor and they're like, no, you need to manage your stress. And I'm like, I didn't want that answer. That's not the answer I wanted. I want you to fix the ulcer that I thought I had. I don't have an ulcer. And the reality,
you have to be honest with your self-assessment. Right? And it's like I said, right? It's like I said, like multiple times through the podcast, like you just have to chop wood and carry water. Yep. And unfortunately, I feel like, taking that first step is a little difficult for people, but like once you get used to doing it, it's totally easy.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I was saying. Like for me, the coaching is finding a therapist. And it took a couple tries to find that one that's the right fit and who's actually working with me to pull back on stuff. But it's hard to kind of look at yourself. What I'm trying to say is it's hard to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, is it a medical condition? Is it a hormonal thing? It could be. I'm not trying to like gaslight people. Or is it, I need to really look at the lifestyle piece and see what happens first. So we'll kind of end it there. Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of add before I ask my last question?
Is your last question going to be Fedosia?
No.
Okay, so I'll quickly talk about Fedosia.
Perfect. So
people that are talking about Fedosia agrestis, you asked me early on, there's only one peer-reviewed study and it's on male albino rats and the aphrodisiac effect.
Okay, yeah.
So there's not any human studies, or at least what I could find on PubMed. And my exact parameters for searching was Fedosia, F. agrestis, Fedosia agrestis, and testosterone. So all of those things put together was what I was looking for, because like typically those are the keywords that you would look for in a peer-reviewed study that like, hey, serum testosterone was evaluated, not some sort of subjective measure or thing like that.
Yeah, so that one kind of knocked out as well. Yeah. Okay, very good. Well, I think we covered a lot. Before we wrap things up, I did want to ask, and I ask this to everyone. So when your life is on fire, because you've got little toddlers at home, what do you go for food-wise? Like, how do you eat healthier or try to make better choices when the kids are driving you nuts and you're going through a sleep regression?
So what do I go for food-wise? Well, I won't answer with beer.
Honestly, fair.
Yeah. So that's unhealthy coping.
Yes. Sometimes it's relevant. Sometimes it's relevant. But just to give people some ideas on like something that you might grab. Maybe it's a snack or a bar or,
I'm a big, I like cheese sticks. Like we have kids, right? So and cheese sticks are they're like 90 calories. I think they've got almost 10 grams of protein in them. Yep. And they're quick on the fast, quick go. And honestly, I'll probably eat 2 or 3 of those a day. Yeah. I'm a big whey protein shake person too, but like sometimes when I make my whey protein shake, I'll add a legitimate tablespoon of peanut butter, right? Not like, the big whopping tablespoon.
Not the buffet size spoon that the firefighters are using. Yes.
Yeah. Because I do like a good vanilla and peanut butter protein shake. But like those are, I just kind of keep it simple whenever it comes to this kind of stuff. My wife and I are outnumbered. We have 5 kids at home, right? So we are hella outnumbered. So we have to do things quickly. And, I like watching your stuff because you've always got very practical, hey, if you need a quick boost, here's an applesauce packet and some, and a little. And
you're like, I've got those, right?
Okay, I got plenty of those.
Yeah, that's the only way to get the toddler to stop crying.
That's it. Applesauce packets or Cheerios.
Yeah, and they work perfectly for first responders. Well, perfect. So, where can people find you if they have questions? I'll put the links in the show notes. But
yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm on LinkedIn. So if you look up Michael Connor and then Frontline, I'm sure I'll pop up somewhere. Frontline's the name of our company. The name is frontlinemobilehealth.com. So all one word. You can't miss it. You can read about us there. And that's really, I'm on Instagram also, but like it's kind of a private Instagram. So if you can find me, congratulations.
Right. You found me. So, and then what does Frontline do just for people's awareness?
Yeah. So, Frontline, it's Russ started the company, after having a conversation with the fire chief. We do occupational health and wellness, annual exams. We do cardiovascular screening on a cardiopulmonary exercise bike. We do cancer screening with labs and ultrasounds and chest x-rays, behavioral health screening through questionnaires. And we just come and set up at departments. We have a lot of large departments, Fort Worth, Dallas, West Metro. We just started doing Colorado Springs. And then, we serve somewhere around 170 departments in 8 or 9 different states, I think, at this point.
Awesome.
And we just try to be good dudes, right? We also do new hires. We also do behavioral health screenings, fit for duties, that kind of stuff. So Perfect. Like I said, like the core of our business is just being a good dude to our customer.
Make sure they're healthy, not doing anything too crazy. So
that's
perfect.
It.
Yeah.
And get them to the right place. Get them to help if they need help.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Fueling Fire podcast today.
All right. Awesome. It's great.
Thank you.